even though there's all this hysteria, right? Even though they're like, oh, you know, Trump is this, that, and the other. He can't win. He can't possibly win. Well, he won. He won. And the entire time when they were talking about how awful he was, and frankly, making comparisons that in my estimation were just so sort of fundamentally ethically wrong to make, insulting to history, insulting to the people that died in World War II, the people that were slaughtered in World War II. When you start comparing Donald Trump to Hitler, I mean, you lost me. I'm sorry, you have just lost me. And you know what? You lost the rest of America as well. But they were too busy doing that to actually cover the news. The news, like, well, the fact that Joe Biden was really, really, really slipping, and he was increasingly incoherent. Here, I have a little mashup here of how incoherent. I played many of these for you over the course of 2024, and even, you know, we may have some from 2022 and 23 because all these signs were out there. The evidence was there, abundantly so. But, oh, you couldn't play this. No. You were somehow a cheap fake. I was a cheap fake if I played this. No, they were the cheap fakes for not covering it. Thank you very much. Here he is, Biden, in all his coherency, as they'd like you to think.
Beer brewed here, it is used to make the brew beer. My memory is fine. The president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate. A solid meeting with and Mitterrand from from France looked at me and said, I'm going to be a president for everybody, whether you live in a red state or a green state.
That's a good one.
Anyway, I don't want to. Making Roe v. Wade. The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, of Putin's kleptocracy, yeah. $159 billion left. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to what am I doing here? One, two. Guy, I'm going to pass by. Shanga,
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks to Western Lensman for putting that little compilation together, because that is just, I mean, that's what it was, though. And there were those moments, right, at G7 where he just kind of wandered off. And there's Georgia Maloney trying to bring him back into the fray, and they take the picture without him. It was like one thing after another, over and over and over again. And yet somehow we weren't allowed to report this. Everybody in mainstream media completely ignored it. It's like, guys, how can you do that? I mean, hey, you would have done yourself a favor. You would have done yourself a favor because guess what? The guy would have been primaried. And you might have actually had a candidate who could string a sentence together, unlike Kamala Harris. Instead, you guaranteed, frankly, that Donald Trump would win again. I mean, I'm a fan of Donald Trump. I'm a fan of his policies. I'm thrilled that he's in there. But I'm just saying, like, it wasn't very hard to do because Biden was the most beatable person on the planet besides Kamala Harris. I mean, could you come up with any worst scenario for Democrats? Honestly, the script writes itself. But the Media Research Center went back and looked at just how often these little blips would happen, and the mainstream media would completely ignore them.
Whenever the president's a Democrat, the media suddenly lose interest in presidential gaffes. All of the clips you're about to see are from the last 2 months. None of them were discussed or covered on ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, or MSNBC after they happened. First, we've got Biden confusing World War II heroes, the Tuskegee Airmen, with victims of a decades-long human syphilis experiment.
There's a reason why it's been harder to get African Americans initially to get vaccinated, because they used to being experimented on, the Tuskegee Airmen and others.
At the G7 summit, Biden tried to talk about U.S.-Russia cooperation in Syria, but it came out sounding like this.
We can work together with Russia. For example, in Libya, we can save the lives of people for example, in Libya.
Next up is whatever this is.
The question is whether or not we should be in a position where you are, why can't the experts say, we know that this virus is in fact, it's going to be, or excuse me, we know why all the drugs approved are not temporarily approved, but permanently approved.
Yeah. Then there's this awful moment from a commencement address.
I love those barrettes in her hair, man. I tell you what, and look at her. She looks like she's 19 years old, sitting there with her, like a little lady with her legs crossed.
That poor sign language interpreter. And here he is just flat out making stuff up.
Anyway,
and if we don't
drive an 18-wheeler, man.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I could.
That's I got to.
Do any of these snippets have massive political implications? No, obviously not, and that's not the point. The point is the same media who spent days talking about this tweet now completely ignore stuff like this.
Are there people in the Republican Party who think we're sucking the blood out of kids?
I'm not sure.
The story here isn't the bumbling old guy. It's about the media who are doing everything that they can to cover for him.
You know, they're right. That's Newsbusters, by the way, Media Research Center, which tries to throw a dose of reality onto things, because it's absolutely unbelievable how many faux pas were out there. And that's the kind of thing that, like, listen, had it been Trump, they would have been all over. They were always trying to say that Trump was demented and deranged and, you know, suffering from old age, et cetera. Well, the elephant was in the room the entire time. So they avoided this. They ignored it because, I don't know, because they wanted to continue controlling everything. I think they got high off of power in 2020 with all those COVID mandates. And then they started, you know, signing the checks, right? Because they were printing all that money. And Nancy Pelosi and her crew got in there, Chuck Schumer. And wow, did they spend trillions of taxpayer dollars so they could spend all the money. They could force you to stay home. And this was like a panacea, right? They were totally in charge. Deep state took on a whole new meaning. And then the reporters, like the media that's supposed to keep all this in check and kind of keep people honest, they were nowhere to be found. And so that is an abomination. That is a travesty. That is one of the biggest scandals, maybe the biggest scandal in modern history. And this is what has given rise to everything else. I mean, think of the freedom that I have right here, that I can talk to you without having to have a script, without having to have a producer look over the script, without having to have somebody sign off on everything. I mean, you don't have that flexibility at legacy media like you do here. And I think, honestly, this is fundamentally what people appreciate the most. And certainly I like the most. It's a heck of a lot more freeing. Not to mention, you know, here I am coming to you from Timbuktu, and I'm able to do that with a different kind of flexibility that you just simply don't have if you're at a network. Anyway, here's Jan Crawford. I played this sound for you yesterday, but watch it again because it's important to hear her actually say it. And I love the fact that she's saying it to a table full of reporters that are like, because they're all part of the problem, right? Including, frankly, her. I mean, she's a CBS News correspondent. They are all part of the problem, but at least now she's coming clean saying, you know, we kind of screwed up. What do you think was the biggest miss? What was the most undercovered story of the year? What do you think? Here we go.
One of the things we also do in the year-end correspondence roundtable is dig into what was undercovered or underreported. Jan?
Undercovered, underreported. That would be, to me, Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that became undeniable in the televised debate.
At the presidential debate with Donald Trump.
Unquestioned. And, you know, it's starting to emerge now that his advisors kind of managed his limitations. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal for 4 years. And yet he insisted that he could still run for president. We should have much more forcefully questioned whether he was fit for office for another 4 years, which could have led to a primary. For the Democrats. It could have changed the scope of the entire election. Yet, still, incredibly, we read in the Washington Post that his advisors are saying that he regrets that he dropped out of the race. You know, that he thinks he could have beaten Trump. And I think that is either delusional or they're gaslighting.
President Biden has said repeatedly he was sick during the debate June 27th in Atlanta, and he's always been fine, and he leaves fine. That is his position, the position of many of his top aides as well, even though there is that reporting.
Robert Costa.
I mean, that's unbelievable, right? Jan just gave him one big dose of reality, and the other guy's like, well, no. I mean, he maintains that he was sick, and that's why he didn't do so well at that debate. Yeah, you keep going with that, all right? I don't know what happened the rest of the time, like all those other clips that we just showed of Biden seriously incoherent. Oh, here's some more.
To make the brew beer. My memory is fine. The president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate.
You get the drill, right? You get the drill. So the media dropped the ball. Some of them are willing to admit it. Some of them simply aren't because they're clinging to something that no longer is going to exist. In 2025, all of these businesses are going to be challenged. Think about CBS News. Heck, Donald Trump is suing them right now for $10 billion, which is $2 billion more than its parent company, Paramount, is even worth. And he's suing because of what they did with that CBS News 60 Minutes edit. You remember when Kamala couldn't answer the question about Israel? And somehow they strung together some little bits and pieces of her answer. I mean, we don't know how long the answer was. What, she give a 5-minute long answer? The original answer that you saw, they made the mistake of airing it on Face the Nation, was incoherent. And so then they cleaned it up and massaged it a bit so it would sound better to the American public. And in doing so, Trump would argue that was a form of election interference because they were dressing her up. They would never give him the same benefit of the doubt. You know that. I know that. And so it was like this giant mirage. They had a terrible candidate in Joe Biden. They finally realized that they had to get rid of him. I mean, it was the emperor has no clothes. Finally, you had some people saying, gee, this is pretty tough to watch after that notorious debate. And once he dropped out, remember CNN? Jake Tapper, I remember once Lara Trump went on his show and started to refer to the mental challenges of Joe Biden, and Jake just attacked her like an attack dog. He's like, how dare you say it, and that is wrong, and you're not a doctor. I remember saying, even on this show, I had to qualify everything. I'm like, well, I'm not a doctor, because they would jump all over you. But like, hey, we all got 2 eyeballs, and we've all, unfortunately, probably in our lifetime seen something similar with other people, so we know what we're looking at, right? We're not morons. Yet they wanted to pretend they pretended we were morons, or they thought we were morons, and they would pretend that he was okay. Well, he wasn't okay. Once that was finally apparent to everyone, I don't know why they ever allowed him to do that CNN interview. That was perhaps somebody internally who really did want to take him down and put Kamala in. But that was the beginning of the end. I mean, he just couldn't continue. And then he went on back on ABC again. Everything goes back to ABC, to George Stephanopoulos to try and massage the situation. And then that interview was terrible. I mean, there was just no way he could run. And yet the Washington Post out this week with another story saying he still thinks he could win. So I got a news headline for him. No, Joe, you are not going to win. You were never going to win. And you know what? Kamala was never going to win either. The only way the Democrats had a chance in HELL was if they had gotten rid of you from way back when. And even then, I doubt it, because the economy has been lousy. And you guys did that. You're the incumbents. So the Democrat Party is blamed for the horrendous inflation that, by the way, you also told us we shouldn't be believing in. That one really got me. New York Times printing that wages were going up. Real wages weren't going up. Wages adjusted for inflation were going way down. But they're trying not to tell you this. So again, it is no surprise that the New York Times is seeing a decline in circulation of 13% down to 267,600 souls that actually still get this thing. Unbelievable.